The flashing red and blue lights bounced off my freshly painted house, the same shade of sky blue that had started all of this. Karen stood in my yard screaming that I'd ruined the entire neighborhood while a police officer calmly said, "Ma'am, this permit is from the mayor's office." Her face went white. That was the moment everything in Maplewood Estates began to crack. My name's Melissa Carter, and I never thought painting my house would turn me into public enemy number one. I'd just bought my first home, a little beige box at the end of a cul-de-sac surrounded by identical beige boxes. After years of renting noisy apartments, this place was my dream come true. I wanted color joy, something that felt alive. But in Maplewood, that was a crime. When I first moved in, I was naive enough to believe friendly smiles meant friendly people. I waved at neighbors, brought cookies to the block party, even volunteered for the community cleanup. That's when I met her, Karen Reynolds, president of the HOA. The kind of woman who wore pearls to take out the trash, who smiled like she was reading from a manual titled, "How to Appear Nice While Judging Everyone." She shook my hand with manicured fingers and said, "Welcome to Maplewood Estates. I trust you've reviewed our handbook. We take pride in keeping things uniform." Uniform. That word stuck with me like a warning. I had read the rules. 5 approved house colors: beige, tan, cream, light gray, and slightly darker gray. No bold colors, no personal touches, no individuality. Just beige. I smiled politely that day, but deep down, I knew I wouldn't last long in a world drained of color. Months passed. I went to work, taught art to children, watched them draw in bright crayons, pink skies, purple cats, blue trees, and every time I came home to that lifeless house, I felt like the color was being drained out of me too. Then one afternoon, while hanging my students' paintings on the classroom wall, the mayor himself stopped by. Mayor Daniels, the kind of man who actually smiled with his eyes. "Melissa," he said, "you've really brightened this place up." I laughed. "Thank you. If only I could do the same for my house, my HOA would probably call the cops if I painted it blue." He chuckled, but then his expression changed. "Actually," he said, "if you file a beautification permit through the city, I could approve it myself." I froze. "Wait, seriously?" He grinned. "You said you're an art teacher, right? Let's see what creativity looks like in Maplewood." That night I sketched my dream house sky blue walls with a tiny mural by the porch, something that said, "Kindness still matters." A week later, I submitted it to the city, and 2 days after that, I held the official letter in my hands, signed by the mayor himself. Approved. Let Maplewood see some sky again. I was giddy when I started painting that Saturday morning. The first roll of blue shimmered in the sunlight, soft and calm. A few neighbors smiled, even complimented it. But peace never lasts long where a Karen lives. By noon, her silver SUV pulled up. She stepped out like a cop in heels, clipboard in hand, eyes sharp enough to slice concrete. "Melissa," she said, "what do you think you're doing?" I smiled. "Good morning, Karen. Just painting my house." "Beautiful day, huh?" "You can't paint your house blue. It's against HOA code." "Oh, I have permission," I said lightly. Her lips tightened. "From whom?" "You'll see," I told her. She stormed off, snapping pictures, muttering about property values. That evening I found a notice of violation taped to my mailbox demanding I repaint immediately. I laughed, but inside I knew this was just the beginning. The next morning, as I was painting the second coat, I heard sirens. 2 police cars parked in front of my driveway. And who stood proudly beside them? Karen. Arms crossed. "Officers, she's defacing community property," she declared. One cop approached me. "Ma'am, do you have authorization for this?" I wiped my hands, nodded calmly. "Actually, yes." Karen snorted. "She's lying. We checked the HOA records." I smiled and pointed to my porch where the framed permit hung under the morning light. "You might want to read the fine print." The officer took one glance at the letterhead. "Ma'am, this came from the mayor's office." Karen blinked. "What? That can't be." Her husband. George came running up panting. "Karen, stop! I told you Melissa's paint was approved." The whole block watched in silence. One of the neighborhood teens had his phone out streaming the entire scene. Karen froze, humiliated, and I just stood there smiling faintly. But I should have known she wasn't done. That night my power went out. The rest of the street glowed warm and bright, but my house sat in total darkness. I stepped outside with a flashlight and found my power box open, wires loosened. George came over to fix it. "She did this," he whispered. I heard her muttering after the cops left. She said she'd handle it herself. The next morning I woke up to flyers scattered across my lawn. Protect Maplewood's image. Stop the Blue House. Karen's signature at the bottom HOA seal stamped beside it. I should have been angry, but instead I felt oddly calm. I picked up my roller, dipped it into the bucket, and said softly, "Kindness isn't weakness." Then I painted another layer of blue. Later that day, the HOA called for an emergency meeting. The room smelled like burnt coffee and tension. Karen stood at the podium acting like a dictator. "This meeting is about preserving the beauty of Maplewood Estates," she began. "Certain residents believe they're above the rules." "If you're talking about me," I interrupted, "just say my name." Gasps filled the room. She smiled tightly. "Melissa, we're simply following protocol." "Protocol?" I shot back. "You called the police on me, cut my power, and distributed flyers. That's not protocol, that's harassment." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Even her board members looked uneasy. Then the door opened and everyone went silent. Mayor Daniels walked in. He looked around, then said calmly, "Ms. Carter's color choice was approved under the city's beautification permit. She's done nothing wrong. In fact, her house will be featured in our community newsletter." Karen's jaw dropped. "You can't override HOA rules?" He raised an eyebrow. "Actually, I can. City regulations take precedence over HOA policies." Laughter rippled through the crowd. Karen's face turned red, fists trembling. The mayor continued, "And one more thing. Harassment, vandalism, and tampering with utilities are criminal offenses." He turned to me. "Do you want to press charges?" I looked at Karen, shaking, humiliated. "No," I said softly. "I just want peace." When the meeting ended, neighbors who'd ignored me before came over with quiet smiles. But Karen just glared at me from across the room, whispering through gritted teeth, "You think you've won? I'll make you regret ever moving here." For a while, things were calm. Then one night I found beige paint splattered across my blue wall. And when I confronted her, she denied it until I showed her the video from my security camera. She looked pale, almost broken. "You don't belong here," she hissed. "This neighborhood was perfect before you came." "No, Karen," I said quietly. It was just silent. The next morning, the city fined her for forging official documents. George told me she hadn't slept in days. He said she used to love painting before her mother died. That piece of truth hit me harder than I expected. For the first time, I saw the pain beneath her control. Then one night I saw her outside barefoot in her robe, standing under the streetlight. "Karen," I called. She looked at me, eyes wild. "It doesn't belong," she whispered. "It ruins the balance." I took a step closer. "It's just a color." She shook her head violently. "No, it's everything. It's all wrong." Then she ran off into the dark. The next day, her sister took her to a clinic. The street felt strangely quiet, almost peaceful. I thought it was finally over. I was wrong. A week later, I went to drop off a thank you note at George's house. His curtains were drawn, but the door was unlocked. Inside, I found maps, old city permits, HOA files, all marked up in red pen. And there on the table was an envelope labeled, "For Melissa." Inside was a letter written in Karen's handwriting. "Someone told me what to do. Someone in the HOA gave me the city forms. They wanted your house gone. Don't trust everyone who smiles at you." My heart raced. On the wall behind the table was a corkboard filled with photos. Neighborhood gatherings, printed emails, and one photo of me painting my house circled in red. Beside it were 2 words, "She knows." I showed the letter to the mayor the next morning. His face darkened. "Melissa, he said there's a man named David Barnes, works in city planning. We've been investigating him for fraud. He's been using HOA presidents to push illegal development deals. Karen was manipulated. That night I saw a shadow in Karen's empty house. Tall, broad pacing. I called George terrified. He swore no one was inside. But when we both went to check, the door was unlocked. The air smelled like dust and something metallic. Then from the hallway, a man's voice said quietly, "You shouldn't be here." He stepped out wearing a brown jacket and gloves. His eyes were calm, too calm. "Just cleaning up unfinished business," he said. "Who are you?" I demanded. "Let's just say I'm fixing what Karen broke." Before I could speak, flashing lights filled the street police sirens. He bolted into the dark. They searched every room but found nothing, just a badge on the kitchen counter. David Barnes, City Planning Department. Days later, the police discovered he'd been living in Karen's basement hiding. He'd forged permits, pocketed funds, and used her HOA authority to cover his crimes. She was his puppet. And me, I was the problem he needed to erase. Then one morning I found an envelope on my porch. No name, no address. Just 3 words. Stay quiet. Inside was a photo of me standing outside Karen's house the night of the break-in, taken from across the street. I called the mayor immediately. His voice was urgent. "Melissa, he's still out there. He's trying to cover his tracks. Stay somewhere safe." That night, George insisted I stay with him. We sat in his living room, both too tired to speak. Then came the sound, 3 slow knocks echoing across the street. We froze. They were coming from Karen's house. We stepped outside just in time to see the porch light flicker on, then off again. The front door creaked open. Inside, the darkness seemed alive. George whispered, "That door was locked." We inched closer. My flashlight beam caught muddy footprints leading inside. Then we saw it pinned on the corkboard where the old photos had been. A new picture of me taken just minutes earlier, walking to George's porch. "He's watching us," I whispered. We ran. The police arrived within minutes. They searched the house and found one thing left behind, a small flash drive. Inside were blueprints and documents labeled Project Skyline. It was a scheme, a secret plan to sell off our community park for a luxury development. Barnes had forged signatures, including Karen's. As I scrolled through the files, my laptop froze. Then a red message appeared on the screen. "Stop digging." The mayor confirmed everything later that night. Barnes was the ringleader of a multi-city HOA corruption ring. They used strict communities like ours as cover, weaponizing rules to push people out, making space for high-profit projects. Karen thought she was enforcing order. She was just enforcing his lies. When the police raided Karen's house the next morning, they found evidence that Barnes had been there again: sleeping bag, food wrappers, another flash drive. He was gone before dawn. A few days later, my phone rang. A private number. I answered. "Melissa Carter." A calm male voice said, "You should have stopped when you had the chance." Then silence. My blood went cold. The call ended, but that voice stayed with me, soft, deliberate, almost polite. I sat on my porch, staring at my blue walls glowing under the morning light. That color used to mean freedom. Now it meant survival. I took a deep breath, watching the sun hit the paint, warm and endless. Karen had lost her control. Barnes had lost his cover. But the damage, the fear still lingered in the quiet spaces between houses. They tried to erase me for painting something different, but all I did was show the truth. Because sometimes the smallest act of color is the loudest rebellion.